Welcome to the MCU, Peter. We missed you.
Yeah, Spider-Man!
Before the whole MCU started almost 10 years ago, Spider-Man was easily Marvel's most popular, most well-known superhero. And of course, the homecoming in Spider-Man Homecoming doesn't only refer to the dance that takes place in the movie, but to the fact that he's part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe at last. The character's cinematic presence is still owned by Sony, and this is a Sony picture, but from the very first scene, or even more from the very first shot, they established that he's part of that bigger universe now, and it's wonderful. From the get-go, you got the feeling that you're in good hands with this movie. They cleverly backtrack to former events to establish both the movie's main villain, Michael Keaton as the Vulture, and Tom Holland as Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. This movie is strongly connected to the universe, and at the same time it succeeds in standing on its own, and that's exactly how it should be with this first entry in our new, rebooted Spider-Man franchise. There are 6 screenwriters attached to it, and normally that's a pretty bad sign, but somehow they managed to create a very well-structured story that fits their situation perfectly. And with their situation, I mean the circumstances that Spider-Man was just rebooted a few years ago, that the MCU has already gone through 15 movies, that people tend to get a little bit bored by world-threatening stories that are told again and again. This one skips the well-known origin story of the famous web-slinger, and yet it tells an origin story because after all, even while he is already Spider-Man at the beginning, Peter still has to learn how to fit in. The Vulture, on the other hand, was active way longer, and his story is cleverly connected to the events of previous MCU movies. He really honors his character's name because, like a vulture, he's taking what's left after all those big battles, and he uses that tech to his advantage. Michael Keaton gives a very intense performance, and while he hasn't that much screen time, his menacing persona and something that happens in the third act that I won't give away makes him still stand out as one of the best MCU villains and the best Spider-Man villain since Doc Ock in Raimi's second film. The fact alone that former Batman and Birdman plays this role is crazy, but the movie in general has that joyful meta nature about it. Another example for this is the return of Happy Hogan, played by Jon Favreau, who was of course the director of the very first Iron Man, which has started it all. The Vulture isn't the only villain in the movie. He gets help from the Tinkerer, whose appearance hugely varies from the comic books, but Michael Chernus's own take on the character was a lot of fun. In general, the movie has a playful, modern approach to the source material, casting for example Tony Revolori as Peter's high school bully Flash, but at the same time it's so true to Spider-Man's comic nature, like maybe no other incarnation before. Setting it in high school and not kind of awkwardly like the very first Raimi one did, even great at the time, but with actors who actually look and act very young, was a brilliant move. Also in regard to the otherwise much older superheroes so far in the MCU. This feels distinguishably different in tone and setting, while still being of the same DNA of course. It shares similarities with Ant-Man in that regard, which also felt different enough to be an exciting variation of the stuff we've been used to. And like that movie, Homecoming tells a more down-to-earth story. Not really intimate, but simply more restricted, which is motivated by Peter's life itself. The one departure from his hometown New York, the one time he has to chase after the bad guys to another place, he needs his school trip to get there. In this movie he really comes across as your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and that's great. Another thing in common with Ant-Man and just recently Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is the fact that this movie is really funny. It had me laughing every few minutes, and the humor felt genuine because it's rooted in the characters and situations. At one point, Spider-Man is trying his suit's interrogation mode on Donald Glover's character, and it's simply hilarious. Peter's suit in general is a major aspect of the story, and while I did miss the old school, simpler times of just Tobey Maguire being agile and just shooting normal webs, it does fit in with our modern times and of course Tony Stark's involvement. And speaking about his involvement, I'm happy to say that this is a Spider-Man movie, and I thought the few scenes with Iron Man were incorporated very well into the overall narrative. After all, looking up to the Avengers and especially to Iron Man is a key motivation for Peter. It doesn't feel as inspirational as the whole "with great power comes great responsibility" flavor, but it's clear they had to do something different, and in the end, Peter's still a good boy who doesn't come across as someone who wants to belong to to the heroes because of his ego, but because he wants to fight for good. And Tom Holland is amazing in the role. He's such a natural. Jon Watts delivers 2 very fast-moving, funny and extremely entertaining hours in the cinema, and I definitely consider this one of the best superhero movies. But for me, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 is still the pinnacle, not only to Spider-Man movies but to superhero movies in general. With the lack of Uncle Ben, again, totally understandable, the kind of just touched on relationship with Aunt May and some other things, or rather the lack of them, Homecoming feels almost a little bit too lighthearted. The action sequence with the Washington Monument was incredible, but all the other ones were fun, but not really that intense or creatively crafted. With the heavy emphasis on Peter's clumsiness with his new suit and gadgets and everything, I also missed some more graceful moments. Like Spider-Man swinging between the skyscrapers like it often happened in the Raimi movies. Going along with this notion was the disappointing score by Michael Giacchino. I wouldn't call it bad, especially after seeing the movie just one time, but for my taste it was way too inconspicuous. Of course it's very hard to follow Danny Elfman's fantastic Spider-Man theme, but that's especially what was missing for me. A powerful, inspirational, uplifting piece of music that I can connect to the character. Maybe there was something there, but it didn't find me. Another aspect where Spider-Man 2 completely succeeded was the way it just threw shit at Peter constantly. You had so much empathy with that poor guy who kept on fighting even if he was at his lowest. There's one moment in Homecoming where they reference that spectacular train scene from Spider-Man 2 very directly. They even go as far as showing him in a Jesus-like posture, but his sacrifice in this movie never really feels that big. It's not a big complaint as they focus on other things more, but I thought even though he is kind of an outsider at school, his life really doesn't come across as all that hard. But with all that being said, I really enjoyed Homecoming, and to be honest, I'm super relieved that this movie turned out to be so great, because Spider-Man is one of my absolute favorite superheroes, just behind Batman, and I really wanted this collaboration between Marvel Studios and Sony to work. And for me, and I'm sure for most people, it really did. It seems that 2017 will be remembered as a great year for superhero movies. We got the Lego Batman movie, Logan, Guardians 2, Wonder Woman, and now Spider-Man Homecoming. I'm pretty optimistic Thor Ragnarok will be pretty great as well. And after all the stuff going on at DC, maybe Justice League will turn out good as well. But first, it's time to enjoy this incredible new adventure of Spider-Man. In German I'd say, Willkommen zu Hause Spidey. Ein unglaublich humorvoller, sympathischer und einfach super unterhaltsamer Superheldenfilm, der sich blendend ins MCU einfügt und gleichzeitig toll für sich steht. I give Spider-Man Homecoming 8 out of 10. It's more like 8.1, but I don't do that.
Don't do anything stupid. All right?
Yeah.
Alright, that's it. Like always, comment below, let me know what you think about Spider-Man Homecoming. And also let me know what's your favorite Spider-Man movie in general and what's your favorite superhero movie of this year so far. You can hit me up on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram simply at @JimmyCage. And if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like, and make sure you hit that bell for all I have to tell.